We're starting Be'ez Hashem Siman Beis in Maamar Lashon HaKodesh. So we're talking about these three Maamar Kodesh, the Sifri, the Gemara Sukkah Daf Mem Beis, and the Tosefta. The Sifri says when a child starts to speak, his father has to teach him Lashon HaKodesh and Torah. And the Gemara doesn't mention Lashon HaKodesh, it only says Torah and Kriya Shema. And the Tosefta on Chagiga says all three. It says you teach them, and the order is Kriya Shema, Torah, and Lashon HaKodesh. So now, in the previous sermon, he spoke about the reasons why the Sifri doesn't mention Kriya Shema, and the reasons why the Gemara doesn't mention Lashon HaKodesh. Now he's going to speak about the order of the Tosefta. Why does the Tosefta start with Kriya Shema, then Torah, and lastly Lashon HaKodesh? Yeah. So gam b'hashinui sheyesh b'tosefta. The difference in the girsa in the Tosefta shekos of Lashon HaKodesh b'soif. It says Lashon HaKodesh is the last thing. Doloi kamash shekos b'sifri batchila. The Sifri writes it first. Tzarchiyun. We have to understand this. Ki ein nira loymar kozeh bazeh ein mukdam u'mu'uchar. You can't just say that it doesn't really matter. Things are not really in Davka in that order.
They are.
V'ein seder l'mishnah b'chai gavna. And there's no seder in the Mishnah. Shaharei. I'll prove it to you that the order does matter. He's going to bring a lot of rayas. This whole simon is really a digression to explain that order matters. Shaharei mevur b'hedya b'shas shelamdu halachas misider aloshin. That the Gemara does learn out things from the order. Ein brachas daf dalam abeis omar mar koyre kriya shema u'mispalal. It says you say Kriya Shema and you daven Shmon Esrei. Misai leil Rabbi Yochanan di Omar that you have to be soymech gula l'tefillah. That by Ma'ariv there's a mitzvah of being soymech gula l'tefillah, not just by Shachris. And here it's talking about when a person comes home from the field in the evening, he goes to the shul, he says Kriya Shema and he davens. So it's a right to Rabbi Yochanan that Kriya Shema comes before davening, and not like I think Rabbi Shua ben Levi's the other man he holds that first you daven and then you say Kriya Shema. Okay. Upirish Rashi zal midomer arvis nami Kriya Shema v'achar kach tefillah kadei sheyismach gula l'tefillah. It says first Kriya Shema and then tefillah because he's supposed to say gula l'tefillah. The like Rabbi Shua ben Levi the Omer tefillah v'achar kach Kriya Shema. Alma the Siddur aloshen davkahu. You see that the order is davka. The order matters. Lil moed menu halach. You could derive halacha from the order of a brisa. Okay, that's first raya.
What's the raya?
The Gemara derives from the fact that it says koyre kriya shema u'mispalal. Yeah. We derive that we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, who says that we first say kriya shema and then daven. Ma'ashenk and Rabbi Shua ben Levi holds that you say Shmon Esrei first by Ma'ariv and then you say kriya shema. Yeah. Tfilos be'emtza tiknum. Yeah. Okay. Second raya, Ayin oid yumadaf yadalim abeis ala mishnah umaktires aktoires umetives aneres. It's saying the things that the Cohen Gadol does to prepare himself for Yom Kippur. The few days before Yom Kippur, they have him doing all the jobs. So he burns the ktoires and he cleans the neres. He cleans out the neres before lighting them. So the Gemara says Alma ktoires bereisha v'hadar neres. You see, ktoires comes before cleaning the neres. For a mean, we asked the stira, mi shezacha b'menoira, umi shezacha b'ktoires. We made a pious. We drew a lottery to decide which kohanim get which job, and one of them is the person who has the mitzvah of menoira, and the other one is the mitzvah of ktoires, and it lists that in that order: menoira first, and then ktoires. Harei shehiksha stira avor siddur aloshan. You see that the Gemara is asking the whole stira based on the order. Shemakdim v'mishnah k'toires l'neres, because k'toires comes before neres. Uv'shas sham herich oid tuva b'stiris ko'ela b'siddur aloshan. There's a lot of stiris in that Gemara Yuma about the same idea. That we see the masha makdim b'loshan, that putting something first havehoy ra brura. That's a psak halacha shemukdam l'maisa. You have to do it first. The raya is that it says by the Cohen Gadol, even though it's not talking about the order, it's talking about it's like Mesiach Levitumai. The Mishnah is just telling you what the Cohen Gadol does to prepare himself for Yom Kippur. It says he's maktires ha-ktoires u'metives ha-neres. First ktoires and then neres. So the Gemara is medayik. That's the order. You're supposed to do it in that order. Okay. Okay. Ukemoisha b'krai darshu b'shas kamapamim Many times in Psukim, the Gemara makes such drashas. Mimasha muktam b'kra. K'moy kain, the same way applies to Chazal. Daitem b'lashon chachamim Mishnah Brayse. V'al korchach. The Masha Amru. So therefore we have to say, when the Gemara says Bavakama daf kuf beis, Bavodah Zarah daf zayin, the v'chada mesechta ein seder the Mishnah, that in one mesechta the Mishnah is not in order.
But there actually is a question.
1 second. So let's finish the sentence first. Zerak b'bava shlema. That's only when we're talking about one whole Mishnah. Let's say there's a Mishnah in the first parak of Bava Kama and another Mishnah in the second parak of Bava Kama. So there it could be out of order. Really, the second one was said first, sidran mishnah acheres, and then they put it in order. Zehu b'shnei members. That's only in two different members. Aval b'memra achas, in one member vaday sidra lashon hu davka. In one member itself, if it says Torah krishma lashon hakodesh, it's davka. Yeah. Now, really, if you look up the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, it comes out that in one masechta yesh seder the Mishnah. It's clear. One masechta you say yesh seder the Mishnah. There's a machlokes there if Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, and Bava Basra are considered one Masechta, or they're considered separate Masechtas. That you could say Ein Seder the Mishnah. But within one Masechta, it's for sure Yesh Seder the Mishnah. Yeah. So I think what the Rebbe means here is that there's a Havamina. For 1 second, the Gemara does think that in one Masechta you could say Ein Seder the Mishnah. So he's saying even that Havamina was only said Lagabi two different Mishnayos. But in one Mishnah itself, it's Yesh Seder. Okay. Okay, that cost of a toisvis kedushin reish perk uish mekadesh dir maschal uish the ein shaykh the tar tzachal lav davka v'lo yizu afsu. In the beginning of the second parak of kedushin it says uish mekadesh boy uveshluchai. Yeah. He himself could do the kedushin or he could send a shliach. Yeah. So the first kasha the Gemara asks is b'shluchai mekadesh boy mi boya. If he could be mekadesh with a shliach, then kal v'chaymer that he himself could do it. So why does the Mishnah have to tell us that?
What's the answer?
So Ayin Sham, what the answer is, but Tosfos asks, why don't we answer that it's Laizu Afsu and Echanami, not only with him, but even with the Shliach? Why don't we answer that? So Tosfos says, the Loishayach L'Shnui Hachi. You can't answer that, El B'shtei Bavos, only with two different cases in the Mishnah. You could say Laizu Afsu. This is case and that case. Avaloi B'shtei Tevis, right in two words next to each other. Uish Mekadesh Boy Uvishluchai. That you can't answer that it's Laizu Afsu. Fine, V'atzmos Yosef Sham Shabir Atam. He explains that what Tosfos means. Umehai Taima Nira the Masha Amr B'Kedushin Dav Chavtes Ho'av Chayev Bivnoi. Now let's look at another example of order in the Mishnah. It says Ho'av Chayev Bivnoi. A man is chayev on a son. L'lamdoi Torah, teach him Torah. Ulahasiyoi Isha, and marry him off to a wife. Ulalamdoi Umnas, and to teach him a trade. So, what do you see from this? What's first? Getting married, and then teaching a trade. So this is what we're going to talk about now. Shalimud umnes hu davka achar nisuin. You teach your son his trade after he gets married.
But in the Chumash it says first, the
kerem, and okay, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
The siddur lashon haGemara. That's the siddur of the Gemara. That's the order. Shekas v'yachar nisuin isha. V'ada nisuin, but until the child gets married, right? Tzarach rak lilmod Torah. He should only be learning Torah, not working. V'af sha'achar nisuin higia l'shnas yodches. But if you're going to say that, it's going to come out that he's going to get married when he's 18, because that's the age of marriage. And then what's going to happen? Then the father's going to have to go teach him a trade, and that's part of chinuch. The Rabbi assumes that teaching a trade is part of chinuch. So the kasha is, how could he teach his son a chinuch after he gets married? He's after 18. Okay, wait. It's still incumbent upon the father to do chinuch. Your hand is on the neck of your son until 22. Some say until 24. And it says there to marry him to a wife. So if the son, for some reason, didn't get married till 22, 24, the father still has to be Isaac in that. So you see from this that the father still has a say. He still has some control over his son. So therefore, after his son gets married at 18, he could still be busy training him to do a job. Okay, now v'al teshiveni. Don't ask me a kasha mimashakos of a Rambam zalivus deis. The Rambam, the famous Rambam, says that you're supposed to have a job before you get married. Derech ba'al idea the way of smart people is sheyikbaloi malacha hamafarneses oisei tchila. The first step in life is to get a job. V'achar kach yikna beis dira. Then you should buy yourself a house. V'achar kach yisa isha. And lastly, take a wife, because now you have where to put your wife and you have money to support her. Shenamar miho isha shenata kerem. Who is the man who planted a vineyard? And then it says the man who built the house. And lastly, miho isha sher eras isha. Who megamar stoy to the mem dalad. Mimed chatoyer derech eretz. Torah teaches you derech eretz that you should first have a job, then a house, then a wife. So it's a kasha from the Gemara and Kedushin on this. That's a different subject. Why? But just before he says the teretz, I'll just tell you the kitzur what his teretz is going to be. His teretz is going to be that's by a second wife. Your first wife, your father. Okay, wait. Your first wife, your father is involved. Your father is involved trying to get you your first wife. So therefore, your father will take care of the money. Your father will take care of you till you get married, and when you get married, then he'll first start teaching you a job.
So therefore, financial the first time.
You're not independent at the beginning of your first marriage. Right? Your father's helping you with this, and he's getting you a job, and then eventually you'll be independent. But when it comes to a second wife, you're on your own, so then you have to have a job first. Okay. Now he's going to learn this from.
Still rather far-fetched.
He's going to learn this from the rest of the parsha there. Listen, they learned it out from the story of the war, and the Cohen speaks to the people. People didn't go to war until they were 20 years old, because it says You can't say that the people who go to war didn't get married yet. Anybody who has even one Aveira should go back from the war, from the battlefront. Even if he did a little lister, could go in Sach bein tefillah v'tefillah. He spoke between the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh. Yeah, the avar chaf. But if someone went past the 20th, the age of 20, v'loy nasa, and didn't get married. He didn't get married. Bittul mitzvah sasei deraisa. He's ignoring a mitzvah deraisa. Kemavur b'Rambam perek tes vav milchus ishus u'shulchan aruch or Even HaEzer siman aleph. Shebezdin koifin oisoi shaloi lavro kach. Bezdin used to force people not to go past 20 without getting married. Uma shehu v'sham she'achshav yesh mekilim. The Ramah says over there that today we don't force people to get married. Shaloi lachuf alzeh. That didn't apply because then it was before the Churban. Okay? At least it's an Aveira. Whether they forced him or not getting married is an Aveira. He wouldn't be in the war. Okay? Now, there's two ways you could dray out of this kasha, just by the way. Number one is that the order of the psukim is, you look over there in Parshas Shoftim, it says first, Miho Ish, who's the man who built the Kerem? Who's the man who built a house? Who's the man who has a wife? And then lastly, who's the man who's a Yarev Rachel Levav? He's afraid of the Averis, he should go back. So it sounds like the people who had Averis were still there until the Cohen said those words. So maybe when the Cohen said, who's the man who just married a wife, and who built a house and all that stuff, it's talking about people who never married before. Okay? They're all Bachrim. You're going to tell me if they're Bachrim, why were they doing there? They have an Aveira. In the Chanami, they're going to go back when the Cohen says, Mi'o Isha Yari V'Rachel Levav. The Bachrim are going to go back. Okay, not everybody there was a Bachar. There's some people who are good. They were going to continue and fight the war. But some of the people were Bachrim, like the Rebbe says they have an Aveira. Fine, okay, so they'll go back. But they didn't go back yet, so we're holding by the beginning here. So by the beginning, they're still there. That's number one. Secondly, you could say that someone wasn't zocheh yet to find his basher. You know, people could try from age 18, but it doesn't mean they're going to succeed by age 20. So he's not a balavera. He's trying. He just didn't get there yet. Okay. Now, ubefrat sham chazal kedushin daf chaf teslam base the aber chaf beloy nasta kol yom of behirur avera. So besides for the etzem avera of not getting married, you also have thoughts of avera. V'yom uzal hirhure avera kashim avera. Thoughts of Aveira are worse than the Aveira itself. The whole limud that we're not allowed to have bad thoughts, that's all learned out from the war. It says there by the war, The Gemara darshans liyos nishma mihir aveira, that you can't have thoughts of aveira. The Cohen kosvu u'k'moy Cohen hechmiru sham b'Gemara al aver chaf v'loy nasa. It's very machmir on somebody who went past 20. Shalosh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer tipach atzmoisav Rachman litzlan. Kodesh Baruch Hu says his bones should blow up. V'im Cohen al korchach masha Amar akasi v'al milchama. Therefore, when it says regarding the people in the soldiers in the battle, umiho isha sher eras isha, who's the man who married a wife, but didn't actually bring her in yet. Zev vadai ma'ir isha shniya. It's talking about his second wife. That's what the Rebbe is trying to prove here. Kvar nasa isha. He already has a wife from before. Kalacha b'shnasi ches. So he was 18. He got married. He had children. Whatever. Now his wife died. His wife got divorced from him. Now he's marrying a new wife. Okay, and that's the case where you're supposed to have your bias and your kerem before you marry a new wife. Well, but it's not. When you think about it, what he's saying is that by the first marriage, the father helps him. By the second marriage,
the father doesn't want to help.
Okay, so then you're like by your second marriage in the Chanami.
I get it.
In the Chanami. In other words, really, you could generalize the Rebbe's teretz. The Rebbe's teretz is Ishta Shniya. But I think
there are
you could generalize
out there too, you know that, yeah?
Right, you could have a cheap father. So, what I'm saying is to generalize.
We just want to help their son.
To generalize what he's saying, Ishta Shniya is lav davki Ishta Shniya. It could be Ishta Rishayna if his father's not helping him.
Yeah.
His father's not helping him, then he could get married on his own, but he has to pay for it. So, in order to pay for it, you first have to have a job. All right. Okay. Now. Aval Nasa Isha, by the way, the Rebbe established in his early years in America a yeshiva called Tiferes Bachrim. These are Bachrim who were Yisraelim from the war. His fathers were killed in the war and they were here by themselves in America, and they had to support themselves somehow. They couldn't just learn Torah until they married. So they got jobs and they learned in this place by night in this kollel. And the Rebbe, Satmar Rebbe, used to go to this kollel and say shiurim for them. So he also recognized the need. Sometimes you have Yisraelim, you have people whose fathers are not there to help them, and they need to work before they get married. So Ishta Shniya, basically, or it's cheap, right? Ishta Shniya is lav davka. All right. Vim Kain, Ma'ashal limed chatoyer derech eretz. This, the Torah teaches you the right way to do things. She'eloi bais v'kerem, that you have to first have a house and a job. Ulidasa Rambam havikerem pirushay parnasa. Parnasa kvua. Kerem means a source of income. Koyim anisuin before marriage. This whole pasuk is Mayri b'nisui isha shniya. V'imkein v'adai she'ein lo havi mizer raya al isha rishoyna. You can't prove that by your first wife shehi chayva alav midiraisa b'chol oifim v'oifim, that you should go and that the first wife, which is a chayva, he means the first wife, before you had children, you have a chiyuv to marry the first wife. The second wife, you have a wife already. What are you marrying a second wife for? It's your own thing. So for that,
even if the wife dies, it's not really your father's job to have the second wife.
So this is confusing now, because I said before Ishta Shniya is lav davka. It's just a matter of when your father's helping you or not. But the Rebbe is clouding this subject here, because he's saying here the word of Ishta Rishayna is not that Ishta Rishayna because your father happens to be there to help you, but Ishta Rishayna that there's a chiyuv to marry her. The second wife, you have a wife already, you're yoitz already.
Or she died.
But it depends if she died with children or not. If you had children, you don't have a chiyuv to have a second wife.
You are D'Rabbanan.
What?
D'Rabbanan you are.
If she died with children, D'Rabbanan, right, okay. So what he's saying here is a little different from what I said a minute ago. He's saying here, Ishta Rishayna, the word is because you're mechuyev to have a first wife. So you can't wait till you get a job and a kerem and a house and all these things. If you don't have enough money for all these things, you're going to put off getting married. Maybe you'll never get married. That's what he's saying now. So it's like, it's not clear what the word of Ishta Rishayna is. Okay. It must be Cain. It must be so. Shahari lav kol adam zoich lebayis v'kerem uparnasa kvua. Not everybody is zoich to have an income and a house. Uviyad ha'adam hu rak lilmoid umnus. He has the power to learn a trade, but that doesn't guarantee him an income. That being poor or rich doesn't depend on your job. Uv'gemar tainas daf chavhei shalom alei HaKadosh Baruch Hu leRabbi Elazar ben Pedas. Famous story. Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas was a very poor man, and he fainted once from I think it says he went to have his blood let, and then he took a piece of garlic in his mouth and he fainted. And in his dream he saw HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to him, and he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why do you make me so poor? Can't you change my mazel and make me rich? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, Nichalach de'achbe le'alma me'resha. Do you want me to go and start the whole world over? Destroy the whole world and start over again from scratch? Efshar de misyaldas v'shaita de mizayni. Maybe when you'll be born at a time when you have a mazel of having mezainis, because it says bani chayim mezainis lav b'schus atalia b'mazel atalia. It's totally in your mazel, and what mazel you were born, that determines whether you're going to have mezainis or not. So Amri lekamei, I said before Hashem, kule hai ve'efshar. Even if you start the whole world over, it's not even definite that I'm going to have a parnasa then. It's not worth it. Even then, it might not happen. Pirish Rashi's alakati hach sveka. Even then it's a suffix. Dil maloi ramina b'shaita the mizaynis. Maybe I won't be born at a time of mizaynis. V'im kain elu shaloi noldu b'shaita the mizayni. Those boys who were born at a time when they can't make a living. Hachi peturim milisa isha kol yimeiam. Are you going to tell me that they're patur from getting married? Okay, so he's clearly not saying what I said. I said ishto ishniya and ishto ishayin zavort whether the father helps you. He's saying no. Whether or not the father helps you, you have a chiyuv to marry your ishto yishayna even if you don't have a parnasa. It could be that Tiferes Bachrim was that they needed parnasa, but he's not telling them to delay getting married until they have a good parnasa. They could start out being a truck driver or doing whatever they can do, and whatever parnasa that makes, it's even if it doesn't make enough, they should still get married. All right. Yeah. Okay. Uva Gemara Megillah Daf Chav Zayin. Another Maamar now. In Megillah Chav Zayin it says, Sha'af im ein loy ma yoichal. Even a person who has nothing to eat, lo yimkor Sefer Torah. He can't sell a Sefer Torah to get money. Aval lisa isha moichin Sefer Torah. But you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah in order to marry a wife. Uva Rambam Perek Yud Milcha Sefer Torah, Uva Tur Yoredeya, Shulchan Aruch Siman Reish Ayin. The Mairi kishe'ein loy davar acher limkor. It's talking when you have nothing else to sell. So you have nothing besides Sefer Torah, you have no choice. To get married, you need X dollars, you have to sell your Sefer Torah to get the money. So it's mutter to sell a Sefer Torah. Umavur bazeh, we see from this, di'af bi'ani meduka, even when you have a very poor man, Rachman litzlan, she'ein loy shum davar, he has nothing else to sell. He has no house, he has no furniture, nothing in the world, Ela ha-Sefer Torah. The only thing left is the Sefer Torah, misparnes min tzedakah, and he's getting money from tzedakah. Because if he would be having a job, then he wouldn't have to sell the Sefer Torah to be nice to Isha, right? He's a total poor man. He has no money at all. Mikol makom mutal alav achiyev lisa Isha. He still has a chiyev to get married. Yeah. Ad shebishvil chiyev zeh mutar loy limkar Sefer Torah. He's not only mechuyev to get married, he's mechuyev to go and sell the Sefer Torah in order to get married. For no other purpose are you allowed to sell a Sefer Torah, only Lisa Isha. And still you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah to get married. Is the charaya that a person should get married even if they're an ani ve'evyin. That's what he wants to show from this. Now I was thinking, l'choira, you could say that the pshat is like this, that after you sell the Sefer Torah, let's say the Sefer Torah costs $40,000, and to get married costs $10,000. So now that you sell the Sefer Torah, you're going to have extra $30,000. Now you can get married with money left over. And the money is in place of what it says. You have to have a kerem and a house. So you could buy yourself a kerem, buy yourself a house, and get married. So it's not a raya that the ani ve'evyin should get married as an ani ve'evyin. Maybe he's going to sell the Sefer Torah, and he'll have money left over after the chasna to buy himself his kerem and his house.
Still not.
Now, it could be that he held that since the Gemara doesn't speak out what the Sefer Torah... Since the Gemara doesn't speak out that the Sefer Torah has to be worth more than the price of getting married, it could be that we're talking when the Sefer Torah is worth exactly mistima sashas. It's talking when it's exactly enough to get married with. So you have no extra money to support yourself. So maybe that's his raya. All right. Now, v'ayin sham bebeis Yosef b'shem Rabbeinu Enoch v'shach sham v'ayin oid b'shulchan aruch Chaim kufnun gimel v'abnu Ezra siman aleph. More Yavam Samachei, Omar Rava. Another raya that you have to get married even when you have no money. What's the raya? Noisei adam kama nashim. A man is allowed to marry many women. For who the matziv mekam b'mizonaihu. It's only if you can support them all, right? For huva memrazu berambam perek gedal milchas ishus v'shulchan aruch even noezes min aleph. V'im kain midahisna t'nai zeh. It makes this condition on having enough income. The matziv mekam b'mizonayu al nisue kama nashim. It only says that multiple wives. Shma minah devi nisui isha achas. That when you get married to one wife. Less of a hachtana. There's no conditions. You don't have to have enough to get married. It doesn't say Noisei Adam Isha ubilvad sheyachol lefarnasa. Never says that. Obviously, you can get married even if you don't have money. You have no right to abstain from marrying mitzvahs period rivia and having children. If somebody knows it will be a tzirka for him, when we have kids, he's allowed to. If one knows it will be a tzirka. Oh, that's what he's going to say now. The Shulchan Aruch says you cannot go past 20 below nisuin im loy unless bishvil ho'inyanim shekasav sham. For the things that it says there, loy zulas, nothing else. Now, what does it say there? If you look it up, you see it says. We're doing this finish. It says there that someone who is afraid that he won't be able to learn Torah because of the tircha of having a wife and children, he's allowed to delay getting married. And it even says that if you're like Ben Azai, that nafshei chashka b'Torah, you could never get married. So that's what he means by Yom Shekasif Sham. Why is it we obviously don't do that today? Yeah.
Yeah.
So now that I've established that this member of having a job before getting married is talking about Ishtoi Shniya, so the kasha is, why didn't the Gemara say so?
Yeah.
And couldn't cite the Daf Mem Daled, and why didn't the Rambam say so?
Yeah.
The answer is we find such things. There the Gemara says that really after the Churban, now that the things are so bad, it would really be proper for us not to get married. We shouldn't get married, we shouldn't have children. And then the Jewish people would die out, chas v'shalom. So therefore we don't do that. So v'kas v'sham b'tois v'sdibur maskal din, tema, hachsiv pru'ravu. That without this problem of Jewish people dying out, how could we be mevatel a mitzvah because of our sadness over the Churban?
Yeah.
So the Shema, Tosfos says, maybe al oisin shekvar kimu peri rivya kamar. We're only talking about people who already have children. Those people shouldn't marry wives. V'hainu zara shel Avram kala. What does it mean that the Jewish people would die out? Shelo yoylid el ben ubas. That we would only have one son and one daughter, and eventually, that's not enough to perpetuate the Jewish people. Especially there was a lot of infant mortality back then and disease, and who knows if having a ben ubas is going to perpetuate the Jewish people. Hare shesasmu advarim. So we see from this that lichtov stam, it writes it very without any conditions. It writes it like as if there's nothing more to it. It just says that don't get married, don't have children, and shaloi lisa isha. After Ma'iri rak ba'oisin shekvar kimu perivivya, even though it's really talking about people who already fulfilled mitzvahs perivivya. So the same way here, I want to say that when it says first get a job, then a house, then a wife, it's talking about someone who already fulfilled perivivya. Okay? V'af oisin shein soivim sham pirish zeh, even those who disagree with Tosfos. Who bishvil shasim v'nimsa zara shel Avram kala. It's only because they don't like how Tosfos was doichik into the words that the Jewish people will die out, and they held that means literally. Uve'islahu ben ubas. They held that if you have a son and daughter, ein zarei kala al kaponim, you're not going to die out. That's why those Rishonim don't want to learn like Tosfos. Ava b'lashon lisa isha, but to explain the words that it says we should be geyser on ourselves not to marry a wife. Bilvad matzi savri kuli alma kafir Tosfos. Everybody could agree with Tosfos. Sheyuchal liyos dekai rak al nistui isha shalei l'shem perivivya. It's talking about marrying a wife when you already have children. B'frat b'kan, especially over here by the memra and saita of having a job first. That from the context you see, we're talking about soldiers in the war. That's talking about the soldiers that already had wives, because if they didn't, they're Baalei Aveira. That once the Gemara learns it out that way, the Rambam doesn't have to say different, because the Rambam is copying the Gemara. The Rambam copies over Gemaras, whatever pshat you could say in the Gemara, you could say in the Rambam. The Rambam just copied the Gemara, and the lidchak bepirushai kashem she'anu nidchakim bepirusha lishna the Gemara. We can say a doichik pshat in the Rambam the same way we say in the Gemara. V'chein hu oid beis Yosef bekam koimis gam mishar poiskim rishonim machroim ve'in zed doichik. Okay, gam haloshin moira kain. I'll make another diuk from the Rambam that we're talking about a second wife. What's the diuk? Mashakasav Rambam zal derech baalei deya, that the way of smart people is likboy aloi parnasa, to have a parnasa first, and so on, right? V'achar kach yisa isha, and then marry a wife. So he says like this: what do you mean then marry a wife? He's marrying the wife? He's doing it himself? V'haloi nesui isha rishoyna haderech husha aviv masiyoi. The derech is that the first wife the father does. Shemechuyev lasois kemi deraisa. The father is mechuyev. The Mishnah in Kedushin said the father has to marry him a wife. K'mevur b'shas shalom duzemikroi. V'chein hu aderech b'chol ha'olam. That's even the way the rest of the world works, even the non-Jewish world. She'ha'av masi es bonav. The father marries off his children. Zulas chas v'shalom b'yisoymim. Except for chas v'shalom by the case of an orphan. She'b'chol ha'doros. Okay. Ein zeh motzi kol. Yeah, but the father has a chiyuv.
But the father doesn't neglect the chiyuv. You know,
okay,
what about
true.
It's
True. So ein zeh motzi kol.
Or if the father's poor, let's say.
That's why the Gemara in Ksubas Daf Daled.
What's if the father's poor? He has no money.
Okay, I hear. But the Gemara in Ksubas Daf Daled speaks about that if the father Chas v'Shalom dies on the day of the chasna, then you're allowed to continue and make the chasna, because if you postpone it till after the shiva, then no one's going to pay for the chasna. The father's already, he paid for this. They prepared the meal and everything. So if they just postpone it and they have to make new food, who's going to pay for it? So obviously the father used to pay for it. Still does today. Except that today it's the college father that pays. But okay.
No, not specifically. That's not a solid rule.
All right.
Believe me, now your godfather has kind of like that. They chip it off because
Right. Okay. The Lama Shina Harambam Zal Haderech. So therefore, why does the Rambam change and say Yisa Isha V'loi Kasa V'derech Baalei Deya Lahasi Es Benoi? Why doesn't he say the Derech Baalei Deya is that they first get their son a job, then they get their son a house, then they get their son a wife? El Kasa Yisa Isha. It sounds like the son's running the show. Shnoi Sebiatzmoi. It's talking about the second wife. He's already out of his father's house, and he's running his life by himself. The Rambam was a Sfardi So really, the Rebbe could have said that we're talking about that his wife died, or his wife was divorced, and he's marrying a new wife, but he chose to make it more of a happy case. So he says it's rather that he has a wife already and he's marrying a second wife, and the Rambam, since he was a Sephardi and he held that you can marry two wives, therefore he just said this memra without any explanation. But his first wife, that comes before a job, that the son, the chassan, should not be working before the marriage. He should be learning all the time, because he doesn't yet have the need for an income. So therefore, those times when he doesn't have the need for an income, he should not be working. Oh, but now the Rebbe says an important thing. The Rambam Lamaisa left out. The whole steer we asked was between the Brisa in Kedushin and this Derech Baalei Deya. But the Rambam, who brings Derech Baalei Deya, doesn't even bring the other thing. Doesn't even bring the Brisa in Kedushin.
Why not?
We're going to speak about it. I went off at length to explain the reason. in another place. Why don't the Rambam and the Torah bring down this brisa?
Which brisa?
The brisa in Kedushin. It says first, we don't have to go on at length. It really doesn't matter to our subject because we're just trying to show that the Seder matters. The whole thing that I'm saying here is just a digression. That you can make p'tiyukim from the order of things. And therefore, there's no contradiction to this from the words of this Rambam because the Rambam is talking about Ishtay Shniya. So, to sum it up, at this point we have three ways of learning the steer between the Brisa and Kedushin, which says get married first, and the Brisa and Soita, which says get a job first. Three ways are the Rebbe's way, which is one is Ishtay Rishon and one is Ishtay Shniya. The second way is, like I wanted to say earlier, that we're talking about when he has a father. When he has a father, the father should marry him off first and then teach him a job. But if he has no father, or if his father doesn't have money, then he should first get a job, because how is he going to live otherwise? Okay? Yeah. And the third way to learn is it's a machlokes. This is what the Rabbi is being meramis to over here, that maybe it's a machlokes. The Rambam doesn't even bring down the brisa in Kedushin, so there's a makom to say that it's a machlokes, and somehow the Bali Deya, the Gemara in Saita, is against this Gemara in Kedushin, and the Rambam paskin like the Bali Deya, and not like the Gemara in Kedushin. But the Rebbe doesn't seem to hold like that, but he's just meramis to it here by saying that the Rambam doesn't paskin this brisa. Okay. So we're holding in the middle of Siman Beis in Maamar Lashon HaKodesh, and while you turn to the page, I'm going to speak a little off the daf a little bit, because we had a problem last time. We ended off with it. The Rambam says, the Rambam doesn't bring down the din in the Gemara in Kedushin Chav Tes. Gemara in Kedushin Chav Tes and Aleph says that a person's chayav l'lamed es b'noi umnes. It also says l'hasiyah isha. So the Rambam doesn't bring down either of those things. And the Rabbi said here that he explained it someplace else. He doesn't say where. He says, Ukvar herachti levair hatam. I already was married somewhere else to explain the reason. Mashaloi pasku Rambam v'atur shechanach b'zeh ke'oisa habraisa. Ve'en laharich poi b'zeh. So he doesn't say where. So I asked a few people, and nobody seems to know where the Rebbe explained this. And I looked in the original tshuva. This Maamar Lashon HaKodesh is he wrote over the tshuva again for the Sefer, and he added things to it. But the original tshuva that he wrote to Pinchas Hirschsprung is printed in the Sefer Taharas Yomtiv. So I looked up that also, and it doesn't say anything different there. So, without having any sources on what the Rebbe said, let's talk about in general. Why did the Rambam not bring this Gemara down? So, first of all, just to say what you can't answer. You can't answer that it's a steer to the other Gemara that the Rambam did bring. The Rambam brought the Gemara in Saita that said that a person should first have a job, and then have a house, and then have a wife.
Yeah.
So maybe somebody might think that that's a steer to this Gemara, that's why the Rambam didn't bring down this Gemara. Well, that's not true, because it's only a contradiction in the order. It's not a contradiction in whether you have to have a job. The Gemara in Kedushin says, L'lamdoi umnis, L'hasiyah isha first, and then L'lamdoi umnis. And the Gemara in Saita says first the umnis, then an isha. But either way, the fact is that he has to have an umnis. So why doesn't the Rambam bring it? Also, people might say that there's, that sometimes it's difficult to be mekayim this mitzvah of lamdoi umnis. Like there's a famous story of Rabbi Chanan. I think Rabbi Chanan had someone who asked him this question from America. He said, I want to be mekayim the mitzvah of lamdoi umnis. Why should I send my son to college? So Rabbi Chanan said, there's also a mitzvah to do bris milah on your son. But if it's meisu echav machmas milah, his brother's already died from having a bris milah, you don't have to do bris milah. So he said, here in America, from going to college, a lot of people went off the derech, so you don't have to do it. It's a famous story.
I just want to stress that the Rambam.
So the reason why that's not a teretz is because if it's a michshol, to go to college, whatever, that doesn't change the fact that it's chayav lamdoi umnis. You just have to find a way of doing it without college or without being michshol and anything. So therefore, we have to look for terutzim why the Rambam didn't bring it. So I found there are two types of terutzim that were said. We'll get to the BNC in a minute. Two types of terutzim were said on this. One type is to say that the Rambam paskin like Rabbi Noharai, which we'll see in a second. And the other type is to say that there was such a mitzvah, but the Rambam held that Bisman is it's not Negea, and we'll see why. Okay, so let's first look at Rabbi Noiroi. Kedushin Pei Beis Amud Aleph, and I have it here in the sheets. So Mishnah Kedushin Pei Beis Amud Aleph. It says Rabbi Noir. It says also that it's talking about Misha Iskoy Manashim. If you have Nashim in your job, then it's bad, and you should try to learn Umnis Kalo Nakia, which doesn't have any of these problems.
Work in Umnis Kalo store, right?
Right. But then it says afterwards, Rabbi Noiroi Omer. Let me see, find it here. It's here it is, right in the middle of the Mishnah. Rabbi Noiroi Omer Meniach Ani Kol Umnis Shabba'olam. I leave behind all other jobs in the world. I only teach my son Torah. A person gets the schar for the Torah in this world. He gets the schar in the next world. Other jobs don't have this feature because a person gets sick and he can't work, or he's old, then he can't do his job anymore. Then he's starving before the days of pensions and Social Security. There wasn't anything to live on, so people didn't have anything after that.
Even Social Security,
yeah, all right. The Torah is not like that. So he's saying the Torah helps you for your whole life. So first of all, what's Rabbi Noiroi saying? He's saying that everybody should do this? No, he says, I'm doing it. I don't teach my son Anuminous. He never said that anybody else has to do it.
That's a kasha.
So, and secondly, what's he saying? That the Torah gives him schar in this world, in the end of his life when he's old. The Torah doesn't give you any money. The Torah is good, but it doesn't give you any money. How is Rabbi Noiroi saying you're going to make money? How are you going to pay the bills? So, here's what I was thinking. The Rambam, there's a famous kasha. The Rambam says in Hilchos Talmud Torah, a person shouldn't learn Torah and then depend on other people. He should have his own source of income. He shouldn't be depending on people. That's one Rambam. The other Rambam, Hilchos Shemitah V'Yovel, that says that Lo Shevet Levi Bilvad, not only Shevet Levi, but anybody who wants to go and sit and learn Torah, Hashem will make sure that he has parnasa. So the question is, how's that shtim with the other Rambam? So the answer I always heard is that the difference is the Rambam in Hilchos Talmud Torah is talking about someone who's going to take tzedakah. He's going to go and learn Torah, and he's going to go and beg for money. That you can't do. Mashenkin, when in Shemitah V'Yovel, he's talking about that you have your own source of income, not from a job, but from, let's say, investments or whatever. You have bitachon in Hashem, that Hashem will send you such a source of income. Not from other people, though. That's what the Rambam means. All right, so getting back to Rabbi Noiroi is saying like this: if you want to be a Shevet Levinik, you want to be like Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who only learns Torah, it's not oisik in Malacha, then if you have bitachon and you do that, then you could do that. By the way, nobody's doing that today. All the people in Kollel today, they all have a plan how they sit in Kollel. Either their wife or their father-in-law or something, or their parents. Somebody gives them money.
That's the bad side.
Right, it's very bad. But that's
but
they're not.
I understand, but the wife doesn't.
No one should make their wife work. Correct. But anyway, that's the problem today. Nobody's a Shevet Levinik. But the Rambam saying Shevet Levi Bilvad means people who want to sit and learn and they have bitachon. Hashem will send them money, not from others. Not from others. All right. So going back to Rabbi Noiroi says a person. He doesn't say everybody should do this. Right? The Rambam doesn't say everybody should do it either. The Rambam, in the end of Shemitah V'Yovel, says anybody who wants to and has the desire to learn Torah, he could do it. So Rabbi Noiroi is saying, I don't teach my son an umanis because I'm letting my son become a Shevet Levi person. Okay, so that answers that. Now I'm going to explain why the Rambam didn't paskin like Chav Tes Amud Aleph, like the umanis Gemara. Because the Rambam held, since Rabbi Noiroi says there's a choice, you don't have to teach your son an umanis anymore. If you teach him Torah and he wants to be that kind of person who learns Torah and has his own source of income, then you don't have to teach him an umanis. So the chai of Adam, it goes off. Avada, there's such a mitzvah to teach your son an umanis, but it's not a chiyuv anymore. And it's pointed out, by the way, the Rambam does bring down the chiyuv, the mitzvah to teach your son an umanis in other places. He doesn't bring down that you're chayiv to do it, but he says, let's say in Hilchos Ritzeach, he says that if someone is teaching his son an umanis, it's considered a mitzvah. He's oisik b'mitzvah, and therefore if he hits him, he doesn't go to galus. And the same thing in Hilchos Shabbos. You're allowed to get a tutor for your son to teach him an umnus on Shabbos because it's a mitzvah. It's for sure a mitzvah. The Rambam doesn't say that it's not a mitzvah. He just says it's not a chiyuv. Yeah, so that's the pshat. But the Rambam didn't bring down the chiyuv to teach your son an umnus because he held that Rabbi Noah is an option. Not a chiyuv. It's not that we paskin like Rabbi Noah. We paskin like it, but we paskin as an option. Not that you have to do it.
Right.
So therefore, it's not a steer to the other shita about that it's a mitzvah to teach your son umnus. All right, and it's not even a steer to the mission itself that says Reb Meir Oimer Lo Elam Yilamed Adam Es B'nai Umnus Nikiya V'Kala.
Yeah.
Because that's talking when you choose that option. All right. The second set of terutzim that I saw on the Rambam is Maamar Koinis that I got with the help of my good friend Rabbi Yoel Indik, who also says a Shiur on Vayoel Moshe in Kiryas Yoel. So he showed me this sefer called Oisi La'olam. It's a sefer written by Rabbi Shua Pinchas Raphael, Pinchas. The Rav of Izmir in Turkey, the Sephardi Rav in the 1800s, and he writes like this.
What's the sefer on?
It's the sefer on. It looks like it's an aleph-based type sefer, like Stei Chemed, like an encyclopedia. Yeah. So he has here Aleph Umnus. Okay, Umnus starts with an Aleph, so he's going to talk about Umnus. So he brings here, first of all, don't think the Rambam is the only place in Shulchan Aruch. There are other people also. The Rif brings it down, the Rosh brings it down, the Smag, Beiner Yeruchim, all these other Rishonim do bring down the Gemara that a person is chayav olamed es benoyu. But only the Rambam doesn't bring it, and the Tur and Shulchan Aruch follow the Rambam and not bringing it. And the question is, what's pshat? And even the Tur is even more shver because the Tur was the Rosh's son, and the Tur in this Piskei HaRosh brings it down. So why, when it came to writing the Torah, which is his work of halacha l'maisa, why did he omit the din? So he says like this in the paragraph starting v'oid nira ma'aniyas daiti. He says like this. I'm not going to read it inside because it's very long, but he says b'kitzer that the Rambam held like this. The Rambam held that chiyuvei ha'av ala ben are only before bar mitzvah. A person doesn't have a chiyuv to do anything to his son after bar mitzvah. After bar mitzvah, it's baruch shebatrani. He's off the hook. So the Rebbe explained over here on near the beginning of Simon Base, the end of the first paragraph, he said that a person has a koyach on his son until 24 years old. But he's saying the Rambam didn't hold like that. The Rambam held the koyach is only until 13. So Mela, he touched the brisa like this. Let's go back to the brisa and Chav Tes.
I didn't marry for son at 13 to Elisha.
Oh, wait. He did. Listen. No, but not before 13, but at 13. Listen. He touched the brisa like this.
Before 13, we had married for something before 13.
Tani Rabbanan, Ho'av chayav b'bnoi lamulai. Here the mitzvahs a father has to do with his son before bar mitzvah.
Lamulai. Sure.
That's obviously before bar mitzvah, right? Ulifdoisai, okay, 30 days. Ulalamdoi Torah, okay, send him in cheder, right?
It's easy.
Ulahasiyoi isha. So he makes the shidduch ready before 13, and as soon as he comes down from his bar mitzvah, he can get married, right?
Is that right?
Right? Like the famous story, the Satmar Rebbe, there was two boys, the bar mitzvah boy and a chassan. So they asked him who should get maftir. So he said, whoever's older. So the point is that
we didn't make it true with the kitana. That can't even give birth yet.
Okay, listen. So he'll marry someone.
Further.
He'll be 13. She'll be 12.
A kitana, you can't even artificially open.
Okay.
You could.
All right. Anyway, so. It says, person's chayav ulalamdoi umnis. So he changed the order, obviously. He learned that lamdoi umnis was before bar mitzvah, and ulamdoi lahasiyo isha is right before bar mitzvah, and then finally, right after bar mitzvah, he gets married.
Right.
So Ibazoi, Zakta Oisi Lo'elam, he said that the Rambam held that that's all in the Doros Rishonim. People had the ability to do a lot of things in life. They had a strong
even married by bar mitzvah.
Right, they could get married, they were very mature, and not only that, they could learn a lot of Torah, and they could learn a job too, they could learn everything. But, Bisman Azeh, if you're going to tell a boy, 11 years old, start learning your job already, when's he going to learn anything? He's never going to learn a word of Torah. Yeah, so therefore the Rambam held, Bisman Azeh, we can't do it anymore. Now, the Rambam still agrees there's a chiyuv to learn the umnus, of course, but it's not the father's job anymore, because the father can't do it after 13. It's the son's own job to learn the umnus. He says that if someone doesn't learn Torah in his youth, he's not going to become anything. He's not going to be an Erlich Yid because he can't, he doesn't know what to do. And
what's the name of the
Oisi Lo'olam.
The name of Rabbi
Yeshua Raphael Pinchas Di Shagura. from the city of Izmir, Turkey.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's his pshat. Now, B'doima Lazeh, similar pshat is in the Minchas Elazar, the Munkasher Rebbe.
Yeah.
He wrote a sefer called Divrei Torah, and he says like this. He brings down the Binyan Siyum, which you mentioned. The Binyan Siyum says, why did the Rambam leave it out? And he says, well, the Rambam brought it in Hilchos Ritzeach, whatever, he brought it other places, but he didn't bring the Chiyuv. So why did the Rambam not bring the Chiyuv? So he says like this, that the Kanira Shaloi Ratza HaRambam B'chachmas Ruach Kodshay. The Rambam with his Ruach HaKodesh foresaw our times. Last day Mimenu Chayv Kavua. He didn't want to make it an obligation. Lil Moed Umnis Livnei Yisrael. Why? Sha'al Yidei Zeh Yiyu Gever B'Shulin. I think it means some kind of vocational schools or colleges. Geluyim Bechinas Novel B'Shus HaTorah. And the people there are going to be like half off the derech. The Torah Mata He'oleh. They're not going to learn any Torah. Im lo yilamdu nari b'nei Israel Torah b'narusam b'hasmada b'chadarim v'yeshivas, unless they learn Torah in their youth in yeshivas. Uma shekasiv yafa Torah Talmud Torah im derech eretz asay terascha kvar mlachtacha arai. It says that you're supposed to work, but you're supposed to learn mainly and work on the side. So he says im yilmoid bi'akrai in yani umnis or mischar la'asos tafel l'divrei Torah the Talmud Torah yeh kavua. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to learn Talmud Torah b'kvius and the malacha by arai. Mashenkin im yasu b'pumbe choy. But if he makes it an obligation to teach them luminous, and there are going to be special schools for that, then there's not going to be Torah. That's what he says. So he says basically the same idea as the oisi l'oilim, except more like lav davka before bar mitzvah. Even if you're going to do it by age 18, you're going to have college age 18. You're also going to have this thing that people aren't going to learn Torah in their youth. Okay. So those are some truths that were said on why the Rambam didn't bring it. Al Kapanim, going back to the Vayoel Moshe, his kasha was, why did the Rambam say that you're first supposed to learn the job and then you're supposed to get married? And then on that he answered that the Rambam meant by Ishtay Shniya, the second wife. He's B'kayim period of Rivi already.
Or if one's father can't help him.
But that's what I said, but that's not what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said that whether his father could help him or not, if he's holding by the first wife, and he hasn't been Mekayim, he doesn't have children yet.
With this, he
hasn't had children yet, but his point is, if you don't have parnasa, you shouldn't have children. How could you leave off from a mitzvah of having children just because you don't have parnasa? Elamai, by the second wife, when you have already a boy and a girl, and you have no wife, you can get married again, okay, but when you get married again, you have to first have a job to support your wife.
Yeah, but one of the before show the Rambam, what it was, actually support the Rambam, from the Chumash, the order of why you bought a house, why you married a wife.
Okay. Well, like we said, there's another way to learn besides what he's saying here, and that is to say, like what we were saying, that it doesn't mean the first wife and the second wife. It means whether the father could help or not.
Yeah.
If the father could help, then good. But if he can't help, then you have to have the money somehow.
Yeah. Because never denied there's a need for money.
Right. And like I said, the Rebbe himself...
Never said just get married, money will come. Never said that.
Okay, well, the Rebbe had... There were Yisraelim who learned in Tferes Bachrim. They learned there at night and they had jobs during the day. All right. Aval Shuv Tomati Midivrei Gemara Sanhedrin. So now we're going back to this inyan. The inyan of this simon is to find whether Chazal are to be read in order. Like we said before, the Tosefta says first Kriya Shema, teach your son Kriya Shema, teach your son Torah, and teach him Lashon HaKodesh. And the Rebbe's Tanya is that's in order. And the Sifri says the other way around, teach him Lashon HaKodesh, then teach him Torah. So the order is Davka, so then we have to understand why one was one order, one was the other order. But before we do that, we have to establish that order matters in Chazal. So up to now, we were saying order matters. Aval Shuv Tomati. However, I have a kasha on this. Midivrei Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Mem Tes Omar Rava Kol Makom Sheshanu Chacham Derech Minyan Ein Mukdam U'Ucher. Every place that Chazal say something as a list, it doesn't matter which order you do the list in. You get this Gemara here. Here it is. Sanhedrin Mem Tes Amid Aleph on the base. Arba Mises Nimsru Lebestin. There are 4 Mises Skila Sreifa Hereg V'Chenek. Reb Shimon Omer Sreifa Skila Chenek V'Hereg. So what's the machlokes? The machlokes is which one is more severe. The Tanakama holds that Skila is more severe, and Reb Shimon holds Sreifa is more. Yeah, nafkamina. If he's chayav twice, then 2 mises, which one do you give? So that the Gemara is going on that and saying that normally when Chazal say a list, the order doesn't matter. Normally, But in this Mishnah is the exception, because you see that skila Sefer Vayoel Moshe is listed in order to tell you that skila is the most chamer. That's what it says. Okay, back to Vayoel Moshe now. Upirish Rashi Zaloi Diktiku Bahaktim b'Mishnasan. That Chazal, when they wrote the Mishnayos, they weren't medaktik. They weren't careful to write Es Hamuktam Uliachar Es Hamuchar, to write first the one that comes first and second the one that comes second. Sheyesh Makom Shahashinui Meuchar b'Mishnah. Shahashanui Meuchar b'Mishnah Tzarach Lak Dimoy. There's some places where whatever's said last in the Mishnah is supposed to go first. B'maisa could go and say the Ches Begadim Shal Bigdei Kahuna, like the Bigdei Kahuna that the Kohen Gadol puts on. K'dim Mefarish L'Kamei the Michnasayim Kohen Min B'Lavisha. He's supposed to put on the pants first. But it's listed the other way around. There are other places where the Seder is not ma'akiv, but it's written that way because he's supposed to do it that way. If you change the order around, it's not a problem. You go in divrei Seder.
You put the Shevuos first, so you add afterwards.
Yeah, that's true. You go in divrei Seder chalitza k'delekamei, the order of doing things in chalitza. V'im kain kasha tuva. So it's shver. Now that we said that there's no order in lists, so kasha tuva l'choyer mimasha lamdu b'brachas misidar aloshan the halacha hi d'loik Rabbi Shub and Levi. That it says over there in brachas, brought in the beginning of the simon, brachas daf dalam base. It says that a person is koyer kriyishma umispala. Yeah. And by Ma'ariv. So we say Shema Minah, not like Rabbi Shub and Levi, who says that first you say Shemon Esrei and then you say kriyishma. Yeah. So the question is, we're saying a list of things to do. Why does the order matter? Right? Maybe it's just lav davka. Okay. Uviyuma, Masechta Yuma Daf Yadalid, Shakal v'Tari Tuva. The Gemara goes back and forth for a long time. B'mada Nishma Misidar Aloshan, and it learns out things from the order of the Korbanos. So the question is, Haloi b'Feir Shamru b'Sanhedrin Ein Muktim u'Meuchar. There is no first and last in a list. You can't learn anything from there. I didn't see any of the Mefarshim asking this question. It's a big steer in the Gemara. So Rabbi says, I think the teretz is like this. Basically, his teretz is going to be that there is an order. Even when it says Ein Muktam Meuchar, it doesn't mean there's no order. It means that there's an order, but it's not the order of time, chronological order. It's order of something else. Chashivas or whatever. There has to be some reason why it's written in that order.
I just wanted to let you know that
So v'nira bazeh kiven devemasha maktim michnasayim ulevisha. This that you're supposed to put on your pants first, the Kohen Gadol. So maksha be'emes be'gemara. The Gemara really asks over there in Sanhedrin, my time aktime b'masnisim l'ksoinus. Why does it say the ksoinus first if the pants are first? V'tiritz mishum de aktime kra, because the pasuk says that. The pasuk says in Parshas Tetzaveh, what does it say? It says Eila ha'begadim asher yasu choishin ve'efa yamil ksoinus tashbetz mitz nefes v'avneit. Yeah. So it says ksoinus first. So it says Kisoinus first, so therefore we're makdim it. Okay? Because the pasuk is makdim it. Gam al akra, but even on the pasuk, mevakish acher kach tam. The Gemara asks why lama akdame. V'lo yomar ein muktam u'meucher kishe'ein tam b'davar. We don't just say, okay, it doesn't matter which order it put it in. No, it matters. There's a reason why the order was there. Uv'seder chalitza be'emes hi mitzvah she'i yakasidron. By chalitza, with the order that it's written in the Mishnah is the order you're supposed to do it in. So there's a good reason why it's written in that order. It's just that if you do it the other way, it's still good. The Gemara, at least at the beginning, the Gemara thought it was ma'akiv. The Gemara asks, we need it to be kesidron. Even afterwards, when the Gemara comes out that it's not ma'akiv, the Gemara thought that it was just a techiyah, it wasn't really true. Until the Gemara found the proof that it's not ma'akiv. So the fact that there's a mitzvah is a good enough reason. Because for a mitzvah you're supposed to do it. This that Rava said when Chazal lists something, there's no first and last. Hakavana she'ein zeh klala. It's not chronologically in order. Because sometimes there's a different reason to be maktim something. And like you said, by the Torah, there's ein muktim ucher b'Torah, right? But there's still a reason why it has to be written that way. It's just not chronological order.
It's meant to give a shaykhus to what it teaches.
Right. So, k'moy b'levishas big dekuna sheniskasher sham b'gemara levakish atam b'shnui yaloshin v'shpeshini yaloshin v'gam b'seder chalitza einoid ma'akev b'diavad al kaponim. It's not ma'akev b'diavad. That's what it means. It's not chronological order. Shal zeh hi siyam amemra chutz mishiva simonim. The only exception to this thing about the order is the 7 soaps that are used to take off the dam nida. Shasham af b'diavad ma'akev aseder. There it has to be written, has to be applied. You have to put on each soap in order. You can't put them on a different order. V'nimsa shagam me'oisa hasugya the Sanhedrin. Even from the Gemara itself, nira shabli tam maspik. If you don't have a good enough reason, ein loy mashalay diktikabel shoynam. You can't just say it's lav davka. Yalkaponim loy kasha midi masha b'shas brachas v'yuma lamdu halachas misidar alashon. So now it's not shver why the Gemara learns out from the lashon. V'loy amru ein muktim amucher. Why? Ki loy matzu tam acher. They didn't find any other reason but to say that why is one first and last. It's only when there's a good reason. The Ran asks, Lama hiktim mishnah kesef l'shtar. Kesef is a kedushin to Rabbanan, and shtar is a kedushin to Raisa. So why is it? It's not really. It's not the Rabbanan. Take it back. Sorry. It's learned out from Gzeir Shava, while shtar is more like a hekesh, Havai Liyitzia. But the question is, why is it makdim kesef to shtar? V'chein lama hiktim get lamisas abal. He asks also, why is it when it says an isha is yotzes beget uvamisas abal? Why the get is first? V'loy amar ein muktim u'mucher. The Ran doesn't just say, okay, we don't care what the order is. V'chein matzinu b'kama mekoymes v'ein laharich. You find that in many places. Well, the fizeh gam hacha. Time a boy. Here in the Tosefta, we need to understand Hashinoi. Should be Tosefta cost of limud alashon levasoif. It says first teach him Kriya Shema and then Torah, and then lastly teach him lashon hakodesh. And Deloy kamasha cost of b'sifri. Not like the Sifri that says first lashon hakodesh